Hello and welcome to 9-Inch Charge. 2 weeks ago, we learned that in Warhammer the Old World, you can strategize. 1 week ago, we learned that you can move. And this week, it turns out you can shoot things. So, Tom and I, as usual, are going to discuss the rules that have come out in the latest article. There is quite a lot that is familiar, quite a lot unexpectedly familiar, and some things that are a little bit different. So, we're going to go through the shooting phase blow by blow. But just before we do, make sure you drop the video a like if you've been enjoying watching us natter away about the old world, trying to remember rules from different editions and muddling our way through. But without further ado, Tom, the shooting phase.
Oh, Dan, if I remember correctly, this was your speciality phase, was it not?
As a Wood Elf player, I did spend a lot of time shooting things. That is true.
Yeah. And my horror when I opened up the article, naturally my eyes always go to the photos and the pictures, and it's a massive picture of wood elves.
Yeah, it's cool to see the Glade Guard back there in the artwork, because I carried on using my Glade Guard after the old world blew up, but less about that, into Age of Sigmar. And then unfortunately, they discontinued making them, even after they gave them brand new packaging that said Wanderers and everything on it. So I thought, oh, that shows they're here to stay. Little did I know they were for the chop, but they're back. So we will talk about longbows at some point and wood elf archery at some point, I'm sure. But let's get into the phases of the sub phases of the shooting phase. So we've learned that every phase of the game has 4 sub phases. The sub phases in the shooting phase are really easy. It's pick your targets, roll to hit, roll to wound, take off the casualties, and roll to flee. Really, really straightforward. But there are little nuances in that. So let's break them down and then we will talk about the specific rules that we've learned as well about weapons and things like that. So straight off, declare targets. You must declare with everything first. That's the first thing. You can't say, oh, I'm going to shoot with this unit, and then if it doesn't do quite what I want to do, I want to shoot with that unit. You have to put all your eggs in one basket before you do anything, and then see if they hatch or not. And there is no splitting of fire either. You can't say 50% of this unit is going to shoot over there and 50% of this unit is going to shoot another way, which is quite interesting when the Bretonian peasant bowman box is said to come in. Is it 32?
32, I believe, yeah.
Well, peasant bowmen aren't very good at hitting things, I suppose. So you might need 32 to hit something, but
Yeah.
I think it does point you towards having smaller units, and there's other reasons for that we'll probably get onto later on. But if you had 30 something shots, you're going to want to shoot into something quite substantial. But if someone's just got 5 models here or there, you don't really necessarily want to waste 30 shots, and it might be overkill depending on what's shooting.
Yeah, there are some other rules that bring me towards smaller units. So I was thinking that's great value. 1 box of peasant bowman might get me 3 units and 2 guys spare. How great's that?
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, I like that you pick all your units first. I think it makes sense, and I like that it does that kind of, like I said, you have to make your decisions, stick with your guns, and then see where the dice take you. You don't get a chance to go, oh, I'm 1 wound off doing the 25%, so that unit will flee. So I'll just attack it with another unit. I think this is a better way of doing it. Next, you roll to hit. This is familiar because you roll according to your weapon skill, and there is a table that tells you what you hit on according to your weapon skill, and then it talks about modifiers up and down. I'm quite surprised by this because I thought this was going to go away, because it's a bit of for me, it's a bit of a strange table, because ballistic skill 1 is 6s to hit, ballistic skill 2 is 5s to hit, ballistic skill 3 is 4s to hit, and so on and so forth. And then you modify that up or down depending on if you've moved or if you're shooting someone who's behind cover or something like that. So I don't know what the difference is between saying your ballistic skill 3 or you usually hit on a 4+ and then it gets modified. Because you don't, when you shoot, it's not like in how combat used to be, where you attack against somebody else's ballistic skill. And I don't remember, now I may be wrong, so please feel free to correct me in the comments, but I don't remember as a Wood Elf player taking any ballistic skill tests.
No.
That I had
I know
to
you could
pass.
do things to like increase and decrease ballistic skill. And
Yeah,
things
but the
like that.
stat itself, I think, is pretty much the same as saying you hit on a 3+ or a 4+ when it comes to shooting.
Yeah. But then I'm not sure if just like for the fluidity of a rule, if you're going to do a straight increase to stats, it's easier to do the ballistic skill rather than a plus minus to hit, right?
Yeah, maybe. I did. It just surprised me because
Yeah.
I think it's probably a little bit more intuitive, only for shooting, not for combat, that you just shoot on what you roll on.
Yeah, I think there's a reason 40k do it, right? Don't they?
Yeah.
In shooting, it's just this hits on a 4+, this hits on a 3+.
I think this is more telling, really, as to who the market for the game is, and who it's familiar to, because it's an older style of representing it. You know, 2 being 5+, 3 being 4+, 4 being 3+ is not intuitive or easy. It's complex, and everybody seems to want the game to be complex. Perhaps not unnecessarily so, but they want it to hark back to what the game used to be. So this is how it is like that. We were saying before, Tom, weren't we? When we were talking about the phases in general, what we wanted to see was, you in particular were saying you were playing against me with your dwarves, and I think you wanted to shoot at some way watchers behind cover after you'd moved, and it was just pointless rolling the dice. And we did say that we would like to see 6s always hit and always wound, but that's gone. that's not the case.
Yeah.
It's just like what it was in a way, where if you can't hit on a 6, you can hit on a 7, which is a 6 followed by a 4+. An 8 is a 6 followed by a 5+. A 9 is a 6 followed by a 6+. So, and you know, and that's how it is. So it will still be very difficult for you to shoot my way watchers in a forest, especially if you've moved and you're at long range. You've got to think what those modifiers are. So yeah, that is still there. But now it goes the other way as well. So if you increase your ballistic skill to 6, you hit on a 2+, and if you roll a 1, you can re-roll it, and on a 6, you then still hit, and that goes up. If your ballistic skill 7, it's 5+, 8 is 4+, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So if your ballistic skill 10, you hit on 2s, re-rolling, and then a 1 is still a fail. So that's cool. Not quite sure what would be ballistic skill 10 in the game. You know, even a hero that trained all his life with a bow was ballistic skill 6. And I think you might be able to get to 7 with a lord potentially, but who knows? There may be spells out there that can do that. But it's interesting that it goes both ways now, because it didn't before.
No, I really like that. I mean, we played a few games with your lords at ballistic skills 6 or 7 or whatever it was, and it was just it's just a 2+ to hit, and then you can still fudge it by rolling a load of 1s.
Yeah, it does happen. I suppose it mitigates if you don't have a lot of shooting. You can still roll that 1 and then not do anything. So it helps to mitigate that, I suppose, with someone who's supposedly a very good shot. So when you are rolling to hit, only the front rank can shoot, unless you have volley fire or you're on a hill. That is a change back to previous editions. And I think that it is the right move, thinking about it, even though, you know, I want to maximize my shooting when I take my wood elves. I think it is the right move, because I think that shooting will be more impactful, because we've seen that charge distances, especially for infantry, are much shorter now. So if you're playing that gunline army, someone is going to have to get much closer to you before they can charge. There's going to be no long bombing off, 12 inches plus your move. You're not going to get a 16-inch charge on something by chance. You're going to have to get right up close to them. So there's going to be an extra turn or two of shooting. So that only the front rank can shoot kind of balances that out, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it makes holding a hill really cool and really impactful if you've not got volley fire, or even if you have. Like, I think it's awesome that you can sit on a hill and just bombard everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool.
Makes the dwarven hill corner sit, really powerful, doesn't it?
I remember playing against Dan where there was a hill and it was like all your siege weapons and quarrelers and things on a hill, and then all the tough units at the bottom of the hill, and you never get into it. You just have to fight them off, and they never run away. Oh, it's just a nightmare. Yeah, dwarves are things that should be banned. I can understand now why the high elves just move the hills and the mountains and crush them underneath, because they're living annoying. So yeah, next is rolling to wound, and something else is back. We did talk about, didn't we, in previous editions where it was impossible to wound certain characters and certain things. That is back as well, although it looks really rare. So if we look at the chart, if you are strength 3, which is the strength of a long bow, it's the strength of a normal man. That's kind of your average base strength, isn't it? I suppose you would say. You cannot wound anything that is toughness 9 or 10. It's physically impossible for you to do that. I would say probably unless you're poisoned, I guess, because a 6 is always a wound if you're poisoned, if that rule is still in existence. I don't think that this is a big issue. It's going to be very rare to get something toughness 9 or 10. Siege weapons were toughness 7, which would be a 6 to wound. Your big monsters, your dragons, tree men, things like the steam tank, they were toughness 6, which is also a 6 to wound. The only thing I could find in the whole game that was a natural toughness 9 was the Imperial or the Emperor Magma Dragon from the Monstrous Arcanum that Forge World made. And that is like, you get the Magma Dragon, and then it's like there's 4 tiers of Magma Dragon, and it's the top one. So if somebody is taking that, if it comes back into the game, that mind, it's tougher than trying to wound a cannon with an arrow, or trying to get through a steam tank. It's like an upside down bathtub with a cannon on top of it. It's so I don't know, where this is going to come into play, to be honest. There will be augment spells and things like that, and other ways to increase your toughness, I'm sure, or reduce your enemy's strength. But for all intents and purposes, I don't think you're going to come across these matchups where you can't win something. It's just interesting that it's there, really.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen often. But then we don't know the augment spells. There might be some crazy stuff, some crazy items, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would be cool. I mean, we were talking about using magic across the phases, and and combining it with different things that your units can do and items that you have. So there may be some kind of cheeky combo in there where you carry an item that increases your toughness, and then you get a spell cast on you in one phase, and then in another phase, because you've got move and shooting before you get into combat. So you never know. By the time you get into combat, you could, you're right, you could have increased it a fair bit.
And then there's also like hexes, so reducing someone's strength down to 1. And if you've got like a steam tank or a something powerful like that, you're almost immune if you can channel your spells right and get it buffed reduce and hex down another enemy unit.
It's just waiting to see those spells, isn't it? And what
Yeah.
they can do, again, to how it interact with this table. I think it's just, it's just interesting that it's there, that there are things that can't wound other things, but I think for all intents and purposes, it seems meaningless. And then the final step is to remove casualties and take panic tests where necessary. Super simple. You remove models equal to the wounds caused if they've got one wound. And then you take a panic test if the shooting has killed more than a quarter of the model's units. It's cool in the article. It talks about that, and it just says, "Oh, you know the drill." You know, so they're reinforcing that it's familiar. I suppose. There.
Yeah.
So that's the phase in a nutshell. Like I said, really familiar. Only a few changes with to hit and to wound. Tables are back, which is a surprise, but I suppose less of a surprise now we've seen movement, because it feels like the game is going to be much more familiar, doesn't it? So on to things that we have noticed. Tom, you and Dan were chatting away earlier about weapon strength and armor piercing. Now you're much more familiar with armor piercing because you play 40k and I don't. I do remember there was armor piercing in Warhammer Fantasy, because some of the weapons I could take as a wood elf were armor piercing, which was an additional armor piercing on top of your strength. How's it working now?
From what I can tell, so if you don't remember, a previous addition to the game, armor piercing was tied to the strength of a weapon or strength of the user of the weapon. So when you got to strength 4, you would reduce the enemy's armor by 1. Now they seem to have moved away from that, and everything's got an AP attribute. So you just say on the profile, strength 4. If we take the Screaming Skull catapult that's in the article, for example, strength 4, AP -1, and in the center it's an AP -3. So that will reduce your armor. So if you've got light armor, which is a 6+ save, it will reduce it to armor, essentially armor dash, which is armor nothing. So you won't get a save against that shot or attack.
But yeah, it's not tied to the armor piercing value, is not tied to the strength as it was. It's an individual number, because the center of the Screaming Skull catapult template is strength 8, which would have reduced your armor by 5 in the old version of Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and now it reduces it by 3. So that's interesting. And there's also an example later on, isn't there, of a spell that's strength 4, but doesn't impact armor. I think it's just a way of nuancing the rules a bit more, and I wonder how it will come to play. I suppose it's not going to be quite as straightforward as knowing, if I always used to think, if I'm strength 6 and I'm against something that's got a 2+ armor save, I'm going to reduce that back, to a 5+ armor save.
Yeah. The thing is, it's one of those things when I remember when we used to play a lot, once we got into the habit of what strengths did what to armor, it was really quick and you could almost do it without thinking. But now I think it's going to be a lot of digging into what the weapon rules are to make sure we get the armor piercing values correct.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those things that is like an added complexity to the game now, because as you said, it's not so straightforward and it's not so intuitive. But I suppose it means that now there are going to be certain tools for the job, rather than you are just strong enough to do it. So you're going to have to manage your lineup, so your matchup, a little bit closer. The other thing that we noticed was, obviously we just talked about it, was templates are back. It talks about the small 3-inch blast template, and then it does also talk about breath weapons as well. So I can imagine that template is back, and the large template. It'd be cool to see that back for different things. The real template that everybody wants back is the falling giant template, and the felon. Is that the right term? The chopped down tree man template. He used to squash people as well in one edition.
Really, I didn't know that was a thing. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
so it'll be cool to see some crazy templates come back. I mean, why not? Because we've got new formations in the land.
Bring back the foot.
Yeah, the foot as well. Yeah, so I wonder how far they'll go with templates, but there's 2 referenced, so that's cool to see them back as well, because I think they're just a cool way of doing area of effect, aren't they? So some rules for firing that we knew are back. So move or fire, quick shot, as you said, breath weapons. There are a couple of new rules that have come out. So one of them is Armor Bane, and Armor Bane seems to be specific at the moment to longbows. People have been kind of guessing what this is. So this is Armor Bane value 1. I think it's going to be that that longbows are armor piercing at short range. I think that for a couple of reasons. Firstly, in the description of the longbow, it says it increases in deadliness as the range shortens. And then there was an addition, I think it might have been 5th, where wood elf bows were an extra strength at short range. So it may have been 6th. I can't remember, but I remember them being more deadly at close range. So I think Armor Bane 1 would be the equivalent of AP 1, but only at close range. And then the other one, I like the other one, Tom, because if you were to summarize how I played Warhammer, what 2 words do you think you would use?
Run away and shooting, I think.
Yeah. This new role. Is it called shoot and flee?
Fire and flee.
Fire and
You've got to
flee.
get the alliteration, yeah.
Yeah, so that sounds right up my street, and it's for some forms of fast cavalry. So I don't know quite. It sounds like a charge reaction, although it wasn't in the charge reactions. So I wonder where it will fit in, but yeah, right up my alley. That firing and fleeing. Those are the things that I used to like to do the most. So yeah, very cool. And unlike the last article, after they said that there's magic in every phase of the game, we do have spells to look at. So that's pretty cool. We've got a fireball, which is like, a classic kind of spell, which is a magic missile type. And we have a magical vortex spell as well. Do you want to go through these, Tom?
Yeah, can do. So fireball from the lore, well, I don't even think it's the lore, but the lore of battle magic. It's a magical missile with a casting value of 8+, range of 24 inches, and the effect is the target enemy unit suffers 2d6 strength 4 hits, each with an AP of dash. This spell has the flaming attack special rule.
Yeah. So built for burning dryads, built for clearing chaff. Not brilliant for your knights with an armor save of 2+.
No, but would I throw it at a knight? You might do it. You just got to get them rolling dice when it's an armor of 2+.
So yeah, pretty good. The range is pretty good as well, 24.
Yeah.
Especially as you shoot after you move, so you should be able to get into range with that. They talked about positioning of wizards being important.
Yeah, gives you a good 28-inch area of effect with that.
Yeah.
Area of threat even. Yeah, very cool. I like that.
And what's the next spell?
So from the lore of demonology, that sounds boss. Remains in play. Place a small 3-inch blast template so that the central hole is within 15 inches of the caster. Whilst in play, the template is treated as dangerous terrain. The template moves d6 in a random direction during every start of turn subphase. Any unit, friend or foe, the moving template touches or moves over suffers D6 +1 straight 3 hits, each with an AP of dash.
What I couldn't get my head around with this spell is that I don't think it does anything in the turn that it's cast.
No. No, I don't think so
Place
either.
the
I think
template down, and then you create an area of dangerous terrain.
Yeah.
Right, I get that. And then during every start of turn subphase, it moves. And then when it moves, whatever it touches, it causes damage to. So what you're
Yes.
doing is you're creating an area on the tabletop that is dangerous terrain. And then in the subsequent start of turn subphase, it then moves and can potentially cause damage in a different phase to when it's cast.
Yeah, that's
And
how
then can
I'm reading
again,
that well.
and then can again in the move phase if something moves through it.
Yeah.
So you're thinking about your opponent's strategy phase, where the start of turn subphase is, and then their move phase, where you can potentially cause damage with the spell that you cast in your own shooting phase.
Yeah. I would
Now,
like
that is the kind of complexity that the people have been asking for.
absolutely, and I'm sure it's the kind of complexity the comment section will destroy. I think it would be a lot better if you could choose the direction on the first. So there's an element of strategy to that. So you could cast it, well, it looks like they might get the charge off. I'll move it in front so they have to charge over the dangerous terrain. But I think the way, if I was to use it, I would think of a unit that's like a big threat to my line. I'd cast it either on top of it, if I had the range, just a little bit behind it, if it is a bit more comfortable with the range, and try and make that unit flee through it. Because then it would all take dangerous terrain and it would do something the turn you've cast it.
Oh, actually, yeah. So then it could do something in the turn you cast.
Yeah.
Oh, good. It could affect the shooting phase, then the subsequent start of turn phase, and the move phase after that. Yeah, that's interesting. That I didn't think of that. I was thinking that you just put it in front of knights because, as we've seen, they're difficult to wound. Especially I'm just thinking of longbows that don't have any AP on here, unless potentially they're close range. If we think that's what the rule does. But even if they do, the knights are going to have a 2+ armor save. But dangerous terrain just takes models out without an armor save. So I think you're going to want to cast it against something that has a high armor, like a knight.
Yeah.
That is going to be a big threat. And also, because knights will get a much longer charge, you can place it 6 inches away from your own unit and know that in the next turn, even if you roll a 6, it isn't going to come back over your unit, but will still be in between.
Yeah.
So I think that's where that lies.
They
the other
are,
thing.
I was going to say they're fickle though, aren't they? They're like fanatics. Things like this, very fickle. They come back and bite you.
Yeah, that's true. I just wanted to say that when you were talking about the laws of battle magic and the law of demonology, they feel to me like they're not specific laws, more like they're like sort of more general schools of magic. I can imagine battle magic having a fireball spell, but not being limited to just fire spells, like the old school of magic was, if you know what I mean. The old law of fire. I think that you'd see a variety in battle magic, and you might see a variety in demonology. That's just the impression I get from the wording. I don't have anything to back it up. That's just what I think.
Yeah, I like that it's from battle magic, not from the law of battle magic. I don't know why I said law of, but
Yeah, well, that's what it would have been, isn't it? So
yeah,
I can see why I said that. But I think that is it. Really, there's plenty here that will inform how the combat phase goes, which should be up next Monday, because we've seen the to wound chart, which is weapon strength versus target's toughness. We've seen how to hit works, at least in shooting. So there's some things familiar that we will carry over, but it will be cool to see how these formations fight, how many ranks people fight in, what is combat resolution like now, what is the pushing and pulling going to be like. I think maybe it will be harder to flee now because you get pushed back before you just break. So yeah, lots and lots to consider.
It's almost too much, mate. Every time this article comes out, I'm just like, ooh, want to know what everything does now. It's not just like, oh, well, that answers a lot of questions. It just doesn't. It opens the door for so much stuff.
That's all right, because you're not going to have 4 pages of rules. You're going to have 200 pages. So
Yeah.
all those questions will be answered. And just whilst we're on that, I do think, there are different things, aren't there, that we've said the community will be up in arms about. I personally think the biggest thing that would upset the community would be if, when the rule book comes out, it isn't read. I think that's just, they've all been, haven't they? So I think that's what
it.
it is. So, look forward to your 200 page red book. But I think that's it for this week, except for the reveal that's coming up in a couple of days. So we'll be covering that, and we'll be hopefully chatting about all the new Tomb Kings that we've seen. I will be watching it from behind the sofa just in case we get any skeletal horsemen. But hopefully we won't. And yeah, we will see you next time.